this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Lowe's knows Sundays are for football, so tackle your home improvement projects by Saturday and earn your Sunday with great deals on LG and Bosch appliances, select Bounty and Swiffer cleaning products, and more. Then once your to-do list is done, get ready to kick back, relax, and enjoy the game. Shop in store or online now and earn your Sunday with help from Lowe's, official partner of the NFL.
This is the Late Round Podcast with your host, JJ Zacharisa.
What's up, everyone? It's JJ Zacharisa, and in this episode 1111 of the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. I'm back from vacation, and just like that, we're firmly in draft season. The draft guide's out. It had its first update. The Fantasy Football Expo is this weekend. It's a great time of year. And it's a time of year where I start flipping some of my content on this podcast to be a little bit more player specific. Over the next handful of weeks, you're going to hear about schedule analysis, players to target, players to avoid, bold predictions, all of those admittedly pretty generic fantasy football topics. And today's topic is another player specific one, and it's one that I'm going to throw into this rotation every year, now that we've established market score as a new late round fantasy football metric. For those of you who are just joining and haven't been totally caught up, first off, welcome. But second, market score is a metric that we developed at Late Round Fantasy this offseason that assigns a score to a player based on his ADP alongside previous season inputs. In essence, it's like the ZAP model, except instead of draft capital, we're looking at ADP. ADP, of course, can be predictive, but we wanted to create a metric that utilized that market value alongside other metrics to be even more predictive than ADP itself. And that's what market score is. It's more predictive than ADP. If you were to simply draft off of the market score sheet, you'd have a better time than if you drafted via ADP. Now, the draft guide has those values, and we're working on getting them on the lateround.com website too. You can learn more about market score in episode 1105. To be clear, I don't blindly agree with everything market score says. To me, it's simply another tool to use when you're evaluating players, similar to any other metric. I take market score into consideration, and it makes me think twice about some players. It's not my sole evaluation process. That, to me, would be bad process. But it's really helpful. And one way that it can be really helpful, aside from the raw score that it produces, is through comps. We've talked about this before, but I can find the closest historical comparables for players in the current season via market score. I look at their market score, their ADP, and their career year to get a list of players, all ranked by similarity. So the most similar player gets ranked up top. I can then see how that player performed in their season to give us an idea of how the player we're analyzing might perform this year. So just for example, Zay Flowers this year. One of his top comps is Jackson Smith-Njigba's 2025 season. Pretty awesome. That's a great comp, obviously, for Zay Flowers. Now, I've shared some of this with you already, and there are more insights from it in the draft guide, which you can order right now on lateround.com. It's updated weekly for you. But I took all of this one step further. I looked at all of the running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, and quarterbacks who currently have market scores. For running backs and wideouts, it means that they're top 120 picks, or picked in the top 10 rounds of a 12-team league. For tight ends and quarterbacks, we're looking at the top 180. From there, I found the top 10 comps for each player. And from there, I found the average points per game from those 10 players, how those comps actually performed, and I weighed those point per game outputs by how similar that player scored to the one that we're analyzing. Now, since this entire episode is based on this concept, let me run through an example. Let's go back to Zay Flowers. You get JSN 2025 as a comp for him, where JSN scored 21.6 PPR points per game, and that's in relevant games. I took out the final week of the season, and I'll be doing that for everyone on today's show. But you also get a high similarity score for Cooper Kupp's 2020, where Kupp was at about 14 PPR points per game. When you look at Flowers' top 10 comps, you get a weighted average of about 15.4 PPR points per game, which is really, really good. And it's one of the reasons that I like Zay Flowers this year. Now, to be clear, this is not what market score is. Market score is just one of the inputs to get those comps. Market score grades a player from 0 to 100. But this is giving us a weighted point per game average based on historical comps. It's like a next level look at what market score can do. And for what it's worth, I look back at the last 2 years of comps, and technically these projections, they correlate stronger to actual performance than ADP's done, which is pretty cool. So like I said, I did this for every player this year. And my goal today is to share with you from 10 to 1, the 10 most interesting market score projections based on these comps, and give you a little insight about where I'm at with those players. So with all that out of the way, let's do it. I'm in on the Eagles offense rebounding this year with Kevin Patullo out of the picture, because I generally don't think it could have been much worse schematically last year for that team. Now, with that being said, market score is looking at previous season inputs. So it's not that big of a surprise that it doesn't love Saquon Barkley this year. Market score focuses pretty heavily on receiving metrics at running back, and Barkley hasn't had the most robust volume profile as a receiver in Philly. And last year, since market score takes previous season metrics, his low yards per route run was a red flag entering this year. So in the end, Barkley's market score leaves him at like RB10, but then his market score comp projections equate to RB13, so even worse. His number 2 comp is Marshawn Lynch in year 8, where he scored 19.1 PPR points per game. That's great. But his top comp is DeMarco Murray's 2017, where Murray split a backfield with Derrick Henry. Now, obviously, we're not looking at a situation quite like that, so I wouldn't get too worked up about those specifics. That's not what these comps are looking at. Remember, it's ADP, market score, and career year. But it is a little scary that Saquon has just one comp in his top 10 above 18 PPR points per game. That's a heck of a season, don't get me wrong, but it's also the type of ceiling outcome that we want from a 1-2 turn pick. Now, I'm not out or in on Saquon this year personally. I think he's part of that giant cluster of running backs in that late round 1, early round 2 range. But market score is slightly low on him, and the comp projections, they show that too. At number 9, I'm going to go to the Jacksonville wide receiver room, and I'm looking at Brian Thomas and Parker Washington. Something to keep in mind with market score is that it's largely a median type projection. It's not giving you multiple outputs for floor and ceiling. It's just giving you a general projected score, which is not a lot different than a general projected point per game output. So with Jacksonville in that wide receiver room, and this is the same argument I'd make for like Chicago too, I'm probably going to be higher on some of the players in those rooms than market score is, because I want to embrace that ambiguity, even if the most likely outcome is that no one truly emerges. It's just that someone has a chance to, and it's in a good offense, and if that happens, you're getting a huge discount on that player. Now, I say all that because market score is not super high on Jacksonville wide receivers. Market score looks at market factors, and there's competition in Jacksonville based on where these guys are getting drafted. It likes Brian Thomas more than Parker Washington, but that's also driven by our ADP source, which is Fantasy Data's ADP. There's an 18 pick gap between Thomas and Washington. You won't see that in the best ball streets. But that's also why I think Washington is a good target in managed season-long leagues this year, because his ADP on some platforms like Yahoo, it's really low. I'm willing to see if his crazy good efficiency last year translates into this season. You can read more about that in the draft guide. Regardless though, when you look at the market score comp projections, Brian Thomas's top 10 comps bring him to wide receiver 20. Parker Washington brings him to wide receiver 39. Thomas is being boosted by some higher end outcomes. I don't think this is a shock to anyone, given we know his profile is volatile. But he's got George Pickens 2025, for example, as one of his highest. 5 of Thomas's top 10 comps are above 15 PPR points per game, but then 4 of them are below 11 PPR points per game. Parker Washington's are based on a lower ADP, so actually, based on where these guys are drafted ADP-wise, their projections don't look terrible. But at Washington's current ADP, he only has 5 double-digit PPR point per game comps out of his 10. Hence the reason he's close to wide receiver 40. I think these two should be back-to-back in rankings. But given their prices in managed season-long leagues, I like Washington a lot more as a value. That doesn't mean that I'm off of Thomas. And these comps are going to keep me more neutral or maybe even above market with Thomas. It's an offense that I do want pieces of. Tyler Shuck came out as the QB9 with market score comp projections. I'm pretty surprised and I'm excited about it. I've found that second-year quarterbacks are generally really good bets against ADP. They have substantial downside risk, but they have more upside versus their cost than any other career year among fantasy quarterbacks. And generally speaking, with quarterback, we're looking for that ceiling. Now, Market Score does not have Shuck at QB9. It actually has him at QB15, which is still higher than most platforms are going to have him. My rankings are bullish on him too. Because not only is he a second-year player, but he's coming off a year where he finished strong with almost 20 points per game over his final 6. And he proved that he could bring a little bit extra with his legs. Add in Kellen Moore's high-volume offense, Jordan Tyson being added there, the offensive line looking pretty good. Shuck is in a good spot to at least have the opportunity to make that leap this year. The reason he ranks so high in Market Score comp projections is because he drew a year 2 comp of Carson Wentz back in 2017. He scored almost 22 points per game. And lower down the list at number 9, he got Patrick Mahomes' insane 2018 season. Now, I don't think the latter is going to happen for Shuck, but there are enough upside comps here to make me not in agreement with Market Score. He's a great late round option this season. Now, on this countdown from 10 to 1, my number 7 most interesting takeaway from these Market Score comp projections is Quinshon Judkins being the RB32. Now, in regular Market Score, the thing that we've tested, we know correlates a lot better than ADP. Judkins comes in at RB22, significantly lower, significantly better. The biggest thing for Judkins this year, in my opinion, is his situation. The Browns' offensive line was horrible last season. Judkins ranked last among high-volume running backs in yards before contact per attempt. Now we have a huge question mark at quarterback, though I am more bullish than most on Todd Monken as head coach. I think he's a pretty good offensive coach. Another issue for Judkins, though, is the pass catching. He wasn't a huge pass catcher in college, and he ran a route on just 30% of Cleveland's dropbacks last season. Todd Monken has historically split that kind of work in his backfield, so I'm expecting Dylan Sampson to play more of a pass catching role for Cleveland. And that's what Market Score is kind of seeing here. His ranking within Market Score is fine, but the comps are legitimately scary. His top one is Devin Singletary's second year, where his ADP was about 7 spots higher than where Judkins is currently at, but he scored 9.4 PPR points per game. But among the top 10 comps, we've got 6 with fewer than 10 PPR points per game. Only 1 was over 14. Now, I've been a little bit lower the consensus with Judkins because I'm worried about the pass catching and I'm worried about the situation. I didn't even mention the injury either. But in the end, Judkins isn't far enough off in my rankings to call him a player to avoid, even if I'm lower than the market. I think the talent profile is there too, which makes it harder to fade a player like this. But there's no doubt that these comps are scary. We go from 1 year 2 back to another. Let's take a second and talk about RJ Harvey. His Market Score projections put him at RB15, which is exactly why he made it on today's list, because that's very surprising. For anyone who's listened to the show this offseason, you know I started the offseason back in January by calling Harvey a clear sell, a very clear sell. He wasn't a good rusher last year, and it seemed very clear that Denver was going to do something to that backfield. That something ended up being re-signing J.K. Dobbins and then drafting a solid running back in Jonah Coleman. But I'm now of the belief, at least from a season-long perspective, that there's some market overcorrection here. I've seen people say that Harvey's a terrible draft pick this season, and it's pretty much for the same reasons that I talked about back in January. Bad rushing yards over expected per attempt, Dobbins outperformed him on the ground, and there wasn't enough consistency. But he's not priced in like round 5 anymore. Over on ESPN, Harvey's going past pick 100 after J.K. Dobbins. He's back-to-back with Dobbins on CBS. He's close to 100 over on Yahoo. And I get it. The argument is that he's worse than Dobbins. But we're also basing that off of rookie season production. And when I get into round 8, round 9, and so on, I'm looking purely at ceiling. If it doesn't work out, it's not going to kill my team. That's why Harvey's all of a sudden become intriguing. He had a really good weighted opportunity last season, and his top 10 Market Score comps bring him to RB15, like I said. Though to be clear, after RB14, there's a very big gap to RJ Harvey. I do want to be clear about that. Harvey, though, gets a couple of really strong 16-plus PPR point per game comps in David Montgomery's year 2 and Todd Gurley's rookie season. Only 2 of his top 10 comps are below 10 PPR points per game. I've bought more into Harvey this season, even if the consensus hasn't. I don't want to be so concerned about the downside case when we're now so late in drafts. Especially when we know the offensive environment's really good, and we know that ambiguous backfields, they have a chance to bring out really great values. The fact that his market score comp projections look the way that they do, and for the record, market score has Harvey as a very firm RB3 this year too. The fact that market score in general likes Harvey has made me look at this situation a whole lot differently. And hopefully you will too. Market score hates Mike Evans, like way more than I do. When you look at his top 10 comps, Mike Evans comes out as wide receiver 41. Now, I do like the fit with San Francisco. I think there's a lot of touchdown upside in the Shanahan system. He's not a fade for me. But I've mentioned this before. One of Evans' top comps is Allen Robinson's 2022 when he went to the Rams. Frightening. He also gets Vincent Jackson, rest in peace, in 2015, an 11th year player who had an ADP 70th overall, who scored 10.7 PPR points per game. There's year 10 Michael Crabtree, under 9 PPR points per game, year 7 Christian Kirk, year 11 Wes Welker. They were both under the 9 mark. There's only one player in Evans' comp list who scored more than 13 PPR points per game. That was Will Fuller in 2020. He crushed that year, but it's still a frightening situation overall for Evans when we're looking through this lens. Like I said, I don't have Evans this low, but it's pretty interesting to see how market score is treating Evans this year. And it's a combination of a lot of things as to why. Teammate competition, his age, and some of his numbers just weren't fantastic last year, like his yards per route run. Now, I still think that the circumstances surrounding Mike Evans last year, and Baker Mayfield in particular, that led to that lower yards per route run rate. Because Evans still did a really good job at commanding targets. He actually had his third best targets per route run rate of his career last year. But I can see why a model would objectively view Evans as being in a bad spot this year. It's kind of crazy that Oronde Gadsden's coming off a rookie season where he had 49 catches, 664 yards, and 3 touchdowns. And yet, he's almost an afterthought in fantasy football. He ranks 15th in NFL history in receiving yards by a rookie tight end. Now, the obvious reason is that they changed offensive coordinators in LA. They signed David Njoku. They signed Charlie Kolar. They have wide receivers. They have other players in that offense who can catch passes. But to be fair, even with that, market score in general views Gadsden as the tight end 14 overall. And look, we know there's variance with tight end, but this is still very shocking to me. Gadsden's top 10 comps led to a tight end 4 in market score comp projection. There's a very low outcome with one of Gadsden's top 3 comps, which was Ladarius Green in 2014. Ironically, that was for the same Chargers team, but back then they were in San Diego. But his top comp is 2018 George Kittle. Kittle's second year in the league. Kittle went 9 spots later than Gadsden, but their market scores were pretty close. And Kittle scored over 15 PPR points per game that year. This isn't very easy to find at tight end, but 6 of Gadsden's top 10 comps scored over 10 PPR points per game. I guarantee you that we're going to read beat reports this summer about the other tight ends for the Chargers, the other pass catchers. But I don't think that we should lose sight of Gadsden. His rookie season was impressive. And if we're throwing darts, why not throw one his way in a managed league? Maybe I should be a little bit higher on him than I currently am. Despite CeeDee Lamb having the higher ADP, so his comps are naturally going to include some players who are really good. Despite that fact, George Pickens ranks ahead of CeeDee Lamb in market score comp projection. Now, the difference is only by like 0.7 PPR points per game, but still, there's a decent sized gap between the two players in ADP. I do have Lamb ranked ahead of Pickens, don't get me wrong, but I can kind of see where market score is coming from here. In terms of their raw market scores, we're looking at a 72 for Lamb and a 65 for Pickens. It's not like that significant of a difference. Lamb is the wide receiver 6, Pickens is the wide receiver 13, not that far from ADP. But I think the small gap between these scores, that's what's more telling. And that's why we could see the type of result that we're seeing with market score comp projections. Lamb's being dragged down a little bit by year 10 Jordy Nelson, who scored just 9.2 PPR points per game. That's his third highest comp. That was a year where Nelson was competing with both Devontae Adams and Randall Cobb. At least Lamb only has Pickens to really worry about. Lamb actually has an extremely close comp of 2023 Stephon Diggs, and then his second comp is 2022 Diggs. Both of those were good seasons, 16.1 and 19.6 PPR points per game. And then Lamb gets a year 6 Tyreek Hill as his fourth comp, where he scored 18.5 PPR points per game. There are some really, really good ceiling outcomes for CeeDee Lamb. It's just oddly, he has worse floor comps than George Pickens. Pickens' worst floor comp is a Dez Bryant season where Dez scored 12.1 PPR points per game. Lamb had 3 comps lower than that mark. And I think from a value perspective in your draft, that's kind of how I'm viewing these two players. All because of opportunity cost, I like Pickens more at his price. There's a scarier floor given the cost for CeeDee Lamb. But in that Dallas environment, I'm not fading either player. You guys know I'm an Emeka Egbuka guy, and I'm higher on him versus some of the non-best ball platforms. ESPN has him at wide receiver 19. Yahoo has him at wide receiver 23. I have him at wide receiver 16. Market Score sees him at wide receiver 15. His Market Score player comp projection, wide receiver 5. For real. Egbuka's worst comp out of his top 10 is DJ Chark's year 3, where he scored 12 PPR points per game. He also gets Amari Cooper's 2015, where he was at 13.9. Every other player in his comp list scored at least 15 PPR points per game. You get Juju Smith-Schuster in 2018, 18.8. DK Metcalf in 2020, 17.8. AJ Brown in 2020, 16.2. He got a Chris Godwin year 3 one when Godwin dominated. I mean, it's just one amazing comp after one amazing comp. Egbuka's 2025 peripherals took a hit after a really hot start, but there are reasons for it. His injury, Baker's injury, an awful catchable targets rate. Now Mike Evans is gone, and he has a chance to be the alpha. Market Score likes Egbuka's chances of producing a big season. This is the final part of today's show, and you might be wondering, how is anything more interesting than Emeka Egbuka at wide receiver 5? Well, when Jackson Dart comes out as the QB1, that's how. Market Score does not have Dart as the QB1, so you can breathe. That's not what I'm saying here. Though Market Score does love Jackson Dart. What I am saying here is that his top 10 comps are absolutely insane. Better than what Josh Allen is seeing, who's the QB2, albeit barely. One of the problems with Dart, though, is that he's kind of a rarity. No player on his comp list has a similarity above 80%. So while his comps are really good, they're also not unbelievably close matches. But I've said this before, his top match has a 79.7 similarity. It's Lamar Jackson's 2019, his first MVP season, where he literally broke fantasy football. You have that, Josh Allen's year 3, and Kyler Murray's year 2, all driving up his overall projection, which is a little over 22 points per game. There's really only one bad outcome on this list, which is Nick Foles' third year in the league. But that also came after a touchdown rate of 8.5% during a time when the fantasy football market didn't quite understand regression. Now, there are reasons to not be so bullish on Dart. Change in coaching staff means ambiguity. Maybe we see less rushing. And it's not like we saw a super clear picture of the type of quarterback he's going to be long term. Malik Neighbors is banged up too, though he did do a lot of work last year without Neighbors. But look, if you have an opportunity to get Dart as your QB1 at a price where the opportunity cost just is not significant, round 8, round 9, round 10, I do think that we should be leaning into this upside. Consider this. We've had 6 rookie quarterbacks since 2011 average at least 5 rushing points per game across at least 8 games played. Those 6 quarterbacks are Cam Newton, Josh Allen, Jaden Daniels, Robert Griffin III, Lamar Jackson, and Jackson Dart. And for what it's worth, Dart was at 7.3 points per game via rushing last year. This isn't some random parameter to make Dart look extra special. There's at least some chance that Dart is just really good for fantasy football purposes, like the same way that Jalen Hurts is. Market Score believes in the ceiling, and at the right price, I think the rest of us should too. That's it for today's show, though. Thanks to all of you for listening. If you yet subscribe to the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast, make sure you are by searching for it pretty much anywhere podcasts can be found. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter and on Blue Sky at Late Round QB. Thanks for listening, everyone. Greatly appreciate it. I'll be back in your ears on Wednesday on the YouTube channel for the Late Round Fantasy Football Show. And obviously this week, you got another Becoming a Best Ball Bro. And at the end of the week, you get Late Round Perspectives. I'll talk to you then.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.